She met him in a Christian teen chat room, not knowing that he was 47 years old. Kacie Woody was born on October 17th of 1989 in Little Rock, Arkansas. She lived there with her parents and two older brothers who loved her beyond words. Everything would change for Kacie once she turned 7 years old. Her mother passed away in a car accident and it left her heartbroken. Following the tragedy, the family moved to Holland, Arkansas, and Kacie's aunt lived just up the road, so if they were ever to need anything, she was always there. In the summer of 2002, Kacie started going on this Christian chat room for teens, and she just wanted to meet new people her age. Some of her friends had also joined this chat room, so she just figured it was safe. Around the time of Kacie's 13th birthday, she started talking to a 17-year-old boy from California named Dave Fagan. They hit it off from the start and seemed to have a lot in common. Once Kacie saw a photo of Dave, she was hooked. He was just your stereotypical surfer dude. As they started to get closer, Kacie opened up about how the death of her mother left a hole in her heart and she felt like it was never going to be filled. And he told her that he had an aunt who got into a really bad car crash and he didn't think she was going to make it. And coincidentally, his aunt was also living in Arkansas. Several of Kacie's classmates who were also in this chat room talked to Dave as well, and it seemed like he was always available whenever someone wanted to talk. Kacie's friend Samantha noticed how serious Kacie was getting with Dave, and she reminded her not to be so trusting of people online because you never really know who you're talking to. Samantha told Kacie that Dave would use outdated terms like far out and groovy, so maybe he was much older than he said he was, but Kacie paid no mind. Kacie's father was rarely home because of his job, and he knew that she was talking to boys online, but he didn't mind because he figured they probably wouldn't meet face to face, so he saw nothing wrong with it. But he changed his mind a short time later once Kacie told him that Dave had just turned 18. Once he learned that Dave was now an adult, he told his daughter to cut ties with him, but she was not ready to let him go. Kacie was afraid that one day her father would see the messages between her and Dave, so they just resulted into talking on the phone. By early autumn, the relationship was cooling down because Kacie was now interested in another guy from the chat room. Kacie was now talking to a 14-year-old boy named Scott from Georgia, and he was a football player. Since they were closer in age, they clicked immediately, and Kacie wanted to distance herself from Dave. When she told Dave that she was talking to someone else, he took the news surprisingly well. His only request was that they remain friends and keep talking on the phone. A few days later, Kacie and Jessica were having a sleepover. They were alone in the house. It was late in the evening, and they started to hear some noises outside, so they figured that someone might be on the property. They started to hear the floorboards creaking, so they hid in the bedroom. Once Kacie's father, Rick, returned home from work, he saw that the girls were hiding in the bedroom. He searched the home to maybe see if there was an intruder, but he found nothing, so they just shrugged it off. Not long after, Samantha saw a photo of Scott in Kacie's locker, and she asked her how she got it, and she told her that she gave him her address, and this is something that she had done before. Samantha was especially wary of Dave because Kacie had told her that he was going to come down to Arkansas to visit his aunt. Once again, Samantha warned Kacie not to give her personal information out online because you never know who you're talking to, and Kacie just brushed it off. The following day, on December 3rd, Kacie asked 3 different classmates if they wanted to spend the night, but they all declined since they had to get up early the next morning for school, and if there was a reason that Kacie was afraid to be by herself that night, she kept it to herself. That night, Kacie's father and 2 brothers were going to be out that night, so she had no choice but to stay home alone. In order to pass the time, Kacie logged into the chat room. She's talking with Scott, and while she's talking with Scott, she gets a phone call from Dave, and he's telling her that he's going to be in Arkansas very soon. Around 9:41 p.m., Kacie stopped responding to Scott, and he immediately knew that something was wrong because she stopped responding mid-sentence and didn't even say goodbye. Scott decided to type out a message to Kacie's family once they got home so they would have a timeline of events in case something was actually wrong. Once he finished, he called her house phone, but there was no answer. Scott then emailed Jessica and told her that he was afraid that something might have happened to Kacie. Around 10:15 p.m., Kacie's brother Eric arrived home, and he assumed that Kacie might have just went to bed early, so he went to his own room. About an hour later, Kacie's other brother named Tim came home, and he saw the messages from Scott, so he went to her bedroom to make sure she was okay. Tim went inside Kacie's room to look for her, but there was no sign of her anywhere, so he made a frantic call to their father to let him know that Kacie was missing. Once their father Rick made it home, he found Kacie's glasses on the floor broken, and it was obvious that there was a struggle near the computer. He grew even more apprehensive once he saw that George, their dog, was limping and clearly traumatized. As the family was waiting for help to arrive, one of them messaged Scott, and he told them that Kacie had last been talking to Dave on the phone before she went radio silent. In a matter of hours, FBI arrived to the home, and they ended up paying a visit to Scott's home in Georgia, and he was who he said he was. He was 14 years old, and he just really cared about a girl he had met online. Now that Scott was cleared of any involvement, they were now focusing in on Dave. Detectives were now searching hotels and motels with a car with California license plates, and they ended up finding it at a Motel 6 that was about 20 minutes away from Kacie's home. They ran the vehicle, and it was registered to a 48-year-old Navy veteran named David Fuller. They discovered that he had checked in on December 2nd, and when they went inside his room, they found a laptop, rubber gloves, and camouflage clothing. They assumed since David was nowhere in sight, he was probably driving a rental. Detectives were able to look at David's credit card records, and it revealed that he was renting out an oversized storage unit in the area. On the evening of December 4th, investigators pulled up to the storage unit number 313. When they opened the door, they saw that a van was facing them with the engine on. Before they even had a chance to do anything, they heard the sound of a gunshot. They had no way of knowing what they were walking into, so they had to wait until SWAT team arrived, and 2 hours later, they were able to go inside that storage unit. David was found deceased in the driver's seat with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and Kacie was in the back of the van with her arms and legs chained up. It was evident that Kacie had been SA'd and shot in the head, and right next to her was a rag soaked with chloroform. As detectives were trying to figure out who David even was, they found out that he was a father of two, had recently gotten divorced, and he had a virtual shrine of Kacie near his computer. And then they saw that he also had other photos of teenage girls who were also friends with Kacie. Since the year 2000, David would spend his free time going on teenage chat rooms to talk with girls. Tragically, Kacie lost her life to someone she thought she could trust, and it just goes to show that you can't be trusting everyone you meet online.